Recording in progress.
Welcome everyone to the Port Orchard City Council work study session. We're going to get started by reading our guiding principles. Are we raising the bar? Are we honoring the past but not living in the past? Are we building connections with outside partners? Is the decision-making process positively impacting diversity, equity, and inclusion? Calling this meeting to order by starting with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Getting started right away with a discussion about the Kitsap County housing grants, and that will be Mr. Bond.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. Kitsap County's Department of Human Services requested time to present information on their 2024 Coordinated Grants application process. And I believe that Joel Warren and Bonnie Tufts are in the audience, although I can't see them from here. And so they're going to walk you through a brief presentation about various housing funding opportunities. And I don't know if the dais is set up or if you want them to come up and sit at the table with y'all, but I will leave that for the mayor pro tem to decide.
That's fine. Please come up here. That would be nice.
You say up here, you mean
At the table.
over here. This way.
There you go.
Awesome.
We don't bite.
He does too.
That's why I'm at the end of the table.
Well, thanks. Nick, are we good to start? Do you have more to say?
Yeah, go ahead. And Brandy, I don't know if you have their slideshow queued up or if you're just going to scroll through the packet here on the screen.
Perfect. Okay, yeah. So we have 10 slides. We'll zip through it. Feel free to ask questions and stop us. So I'm Joel. I'm with Department of Human Services, Kitsap County. I started in January. I'm here, so the 1/10 of 1% affordable housing sales tax. I'm managing that program. I'm here with Bonnie.
I'm Bonnie Tufts. I'm the program manager for CDBG and home funding.
So first slide, really. So why am I here? Why is Bonnie here? This coordinated grant process is the first time we're doing this with the county. So it's combining these seven funding sources into one kind of application funnel. We're also really doing several applications between services and capital, but from the applicant's perspective, you're only going to see one application in a link that we give you. So it's these funding sources. So AHGP, Affordable Housing Grant Program, CDBG and Home, Bonnie's program. It includes the City of Bremerton's CDBG and Home funds, Home ARP, which is kind of the one-shot home funds from the American Rescue Plan Act. HHGP, very similar to AHGP, both homeless housing programs. The mental health, chemical dependency, therapeutic court program, which is that other 1/10 of 1% sales tax from several years ago that funds just for the services. And then my program, which is the newest one. It's same tax funded, but only for supportive services, supportive housing and services. So since SIA is the newest one, I thought it would be good to kind of show you what it can fund in the big picture. So the first two bullets, I think, are the most important. So the statute says 60% must go towards these things, at least 60%. I just highlighted the things that we're prioritizing at the county. So really it's the construction, acquisition of brick and mortar places to put new beds, new units, to put people who this can serve into. The second part is you can also build those buildings if you don't acquire them. And you can buy land to do any of those things. I separated those out because the bottom two bullets there, up to 40% can be used for those, but the county has really chosen to prioritize the top two bullets. So up to 40% can go for services, operations, and maintenance. And I think I put, yeah, I see it. The services, the caveat is it can include rental assistance. I won't get too far in the weeds, but it's really two tax funding sources. There's a small bucket that can go towards rental assistance, and we think that's about $500,000 a year. Total this year, we're putting out 7.25 million with of SIA funds. So we'll go towards those first two bullets. I kind of expect in the future years for that to go down a little bit. That includes about half a year extra 2022 funds because the tax started. So really that is 2023 annual plus some of 2022. So I expect it to be about 5.5 million in about 2 years, and that's kind of like the steady. Right.
Sorry, is that annual?
Annual, yes. Yep. I don't have a slide of this, but it's in the policy plan that most of you maybe may have seen within the website. So it really just goes along with what SIA can fund. So in clearer terms, what the priorities are for this funding. Develop new units. So it's really it's that first part, construct or acquire new units. The second priority is to really acquire land to do one of those things. And then 3 and 4, which I don't really expect to get to this year because there are a lot of applications for development of new units, is that rental assistance services and then operations of units. Any questions on SIA? Those of what it can do?
I'll just add that I'm happy to hear that there's rental assistance so that
Yep.
we're keeping people from falling off that ledge.
Yeah, credit to Nick, actually. He brought that up a couple times in our planning team sessions. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm a little slow. You said the top 2 bullet points are going to get 60%, and the rest could get 40%.
Up to, yeah.
But it sounds like,
So I guess it's two things, yeah. So what I have in the bullets here is what the statute says. This is what SIA could potentially fund, right? But the county has prioritized certain things.
so could the county prioritize that the 40% goes to the 60%? So,
Yeah.
So in other words, there might not be any money for rental assistance if you prioritize the units.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's true. That could be true, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, great. I think the next is the CDBG slide. I'll let Bonnie talk on block grant funding.
So CDBG is a pretty flexible funding pot. We received that allocation from the Department of Housing and Urban Development. It can be used for housing, public services, and community and economic development. Housing is the priority in our 5-year plan, so all of our home funding goes for housing, and CDBG funding is prioritized for housing as well. There is a 15% set aside annually that can go to public services, and that typically goes to the food banks and those kinds of organizations, and child care services. That is on a 2-year cycle, so there won't be any applications open for that funding this year. All of the funding must benefit low-income individuals and families or be located in a low-income neighborhood. And funds are allocated annually by HUD based on a formula. So I'm sure you guys are all aware that the city of Port Orchard qualifies for CDBG funding, but you've remained part of the urban county. Applications come in annually. And then Joe mentioned the home art funds. Those are a special one-time allocation we received. It's part of the American Rescue Plan. Very similar to home, but they do target more special populations, homeless and those at risk of homelessness, and those are not targeted populations under home. The RFPs that we're issuing this year for home funds and home art, it's about $2.3 million. 809,000 is home and 1.5 million is home art. So you can see those are quite a bit lower than the SIA funding pot, but those will come together in the application. And then the CDBG NOFA is a little over 658,000. These are estimated funds. Our funds are not collected ahead of time. It's based on the federal budget, so we won't know that number until next year. And that funding is targeted to 5 categories: rehab and weatherization of homeownership housing, rehabilitation of rental housing, programs assisting micro enterprise businesses, and public facilities and infrastructure projects that are linked to affordable housing. Any questions on CDBG or home?
Awesome. So back to kind of this grant process of these, of me and Bonnie's funds combined with others, and how it's functioning. So as you know, we're well into June, so we're kind of past that first bullet. We've completed most of the pre-apps at this point in time from those groups that we weren't sure of eligibility. If we know a project was eligible, we weren't requiring a pre-application meeting, although everyone did submit a pre-app, which kind of included who do you think you're going to serve, what's the general part of the project, so we make sure we're on the right page. The TA is next week, so we're doing a services TA and a capital TA, which is purely to help organizations understand what SurveyMonkey Apply is, how to get an account, how to actually get in the system and apply for any of these funds. The grant applications open June 29th at noon, and they'll close the 27th. So then really during all of July, we'll be available to take phone call, emails, kind of beyond what SurveyMonkey can do and kind of help with the actual applications. Then in August, the review committees will score the applications. I put here the capital applications, so I think I mentioned earlier, there's really a couple paths applications will go down. There's a service component and a capital component. Bonnie and I's funding will really stay in that capital component the entire time. There's a separate group that will just review capital applications. So for today, we're kind of mostly focusing on that capital, but just know if it's only a service, there's kind of a separate path. But from an applicant's perspective, they won't have to know the difference. They won't have to check boxes. It'll be kind of the county staff to kind of funnel those in the right place. I can get into the rest of, well, the next slide kind of gets into the flow. The dates are here just for your understanding. The important ones being July 27th, it closes. September 15th, we expect to publicize the recommendations. And then October 23rd, we'll be at the Board of County Commissioners to make those public. So the flow here is just kind of from the applicant's perspective of what they've been up to. So the pre-application forms are all submitted. We've completed almost all of the pre-application meetings. Next week is that TA session. And then in July, they're really getting into that organizational application, which if one organization is doing, say, 6 projects, they'll just do one organizational application and then 6 project applications. So that's those agency interviews and recommendation committee deliberates. That's both kind of mid to late August. And then I mentioned that funding decision happens in mid-September. So kind of already mentioned this a little bit. Just wanted to be clear on which funds kind of we envision going to which path. So that capital GRC is that grant recommendation committee, that CDBG home ARP, SIA funds. Those will, all applications going to those funding sources for capital will go to the capital GRC, services GRC, AHGP, those homeless housing grants. And as Bonnie mentioned, the services CDBG every other year, not this year, so it'll be next year, that'll go to the services GRC. And the mental health tax, they have their own advisory board, so any funds applying for that will go to that advisory board. Then the capital GRC, who it is. So it's 8 members, 3 from commissioners, so each commissioner appoints 1 member. The mayor of each city appoints a member, and there's 1 at-large member. Kind of goes through the pool of each commissioner, and they'll jointly appoint 1 person. As they get together, we as county staff do training in August to make sure they understand what their role is, kind of the scope, and then once they score along with county staff, their recommendations are made public. There's a 30-day comment period where anyone can make their comments about how the recommendations came out. And then again, in October, we'll go to the board and they'll give their final approval of recommendations. Anything to add, Bonnie?
No, I guess, so for the federal funds, as I said, they're estimates, so the program year will start in January, but we have to wait till the federal budget is finalized. Once that happens, then we make adjustments to the funding based on that. We submit our plan to HUD for how we intend to use the funds, and then we can begin contracting. So the federal side of it, those projects with federal funds will get started a bit later in the year. We're still waiting for our contract for HUD. SIA funds, that's one of the advantages, they're ready to go right
Sure.
at the beginning of the program year.
True, yeah. So for SIA funds, when their recommendations come out, really the next stage is contracting. So contracting by December, whereas federal funds, contracting happens
Summer,
June, yeah, summer, right?
yeah.
And then, yeah, go ahead.
When you're done.
The last bit is just, here's the website, here's what you can find on it, so. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, so I understand this is mostly about housing, and I get that, and I support that. And I see, though, that there's some behavioral component to this as well.
Yes.
And I'm wondering if the opioid settlement will have intersection with this as well, because that'll be a revenue stream.
So for SIA funds, there is a supportive housing component to it. When the state says supportive housing, they mean housing with some kind of layer of service with it. So I do see, yes, there definitely is a component. I think as from the county's perspective, we see the other mental health sales tax as the prime driver of services, and SIA as the prime driver for capital. They can definitely do both things, but I think we've tried to kind of make sure we can focus this funding on capital and the other funding on services. Because there's such a great need, I think, for new units, but there will always be a need for services. Not that answers your question at all, but.
It's pretty well explained that the opioid settlement had a lot of potential uses that money could be spent on, and a lot of it was.
It's a pretty small number, though, that we thought might be left locally. I know it's gonna be combined, but I thought it was pretty small, the way they had divided that out. It was like shockingly small.
Oh, I don't recall that.
When you say opioid settlement, do you mean a
Remember that?
change
Really
in the
small.
law, or do you mean, I'm sorry,
The actual legal settlement,
Yeah.
the county is.
Oh, okay.
Might be outside of this
Big
particular.
Might be state-
The drill down was very, very small.
It
Was it for us?
Tiny.
Yeah.
Do
Okay.
they go to cities mainly, the bigger
Offensively
cities?
small.
was it like,
What do we had,
I thought-
$10,000?
it was
Oh, wow.
very,
Okay. Right, well, that question may have less relevance if it's such a small.
For us, it is.
yeah.
Which is why we decided to go ahead and direct it all to the county, because
Right.
if we were to try to administer it ourselves, we wouldn't have had any
We'd
funds
flow
to
through it.
administer it. I mean, it was kind of crazy.
Classic issue, yeah.
Just a couple of curiosity or process questions. There's no limitations on number of applications in a jurisdiction, okay, because in some places, and that would go with the same with awards, that essentially if somebody had projects that somebody feels that they're, are warranted, they basically could walk away with most of the funds. They're not looking at any type of distribution.
I don't know if that's necessarily true. So there will be an equity component to SIA. We have not defined that yet,
Okay,
because it's
that's
the
what
first year.
That's what I was wondering.
But there's a geographic equity component that we'll be hashing out.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't foresee SIA being, we're gonna funnel all of our money to Bremerton where the services are. I think that's not a thing that we're interested in doing. But being the first year, I think we're just fielding applications as they come and scoring them based on merits.
Mhm.
Just seeing that there is a decent geographic equity right now of all applications, but that's a thing that I think would be important for everyone to weigh in on when we post recommendations for comments to say, yeah, but given the first year, we don't have we'll only fund this amount per geography, right?
I would also add that the grant recommendation committees, when they're looking at the proposals before them, if there's an agency that comes in with multiple, they will often ask them, what is your priority? And kind of get a read from there, so that, just kind of for that, if they really do look at all of the proposals, which ones are ready to go, and then they will kind of take into account, okay, you know, X agency says that this is their number one, so maybe we'll give them a bigger, more of their ask and make that project a go rather than divvying it up.
Thank you.
So one of the city experiences was in 2023 where we spent 2022 where we spent a lot of time with homelessness issues. And the county should have a decision, I think tomorrow, on the Mile Hill shelter. But we as a city have felt like the other cities should do their fair share as well. And so I'm hoping that we can see some emphasis on that.
Yeah, I think the HB 1220 will help when we have numbers from the KRCC of what the county is expecting each city to, or at least accommodate. I think there's no teeth to that right now, but yeah, I think that partnership needs to exist, I agree.
Yeah, it's just a matter of equity and treating your people at the site of
questions? Thank you
Thank
so
you.
very much.
Thanks for coming out.
Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem, can I just mention to the council, per your retreat discussion, the mayor had our department prepare one of the applications for this program, and so this is where we are applying for funding
Yes,
to
yes.
purchase a house through housing, or a lot through Housing Kitsap, and then build it with city labor. And so we are seeking funding through this program, and we'll be submitting an application by July 29th.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nick.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're moving on to a presentation, Kitsap Transit, about a transit center possibility. Hello.
Yeah. So I wanted to introduce Brandy, if you can bring over Zach Gray, who is a participant right now, and make him a panelist. He's here with KPFF, who was hired by Kitsap Transit to work on a downtown transit center study. And then I believe Ed Coviello and Christopher Browning are probably in the audience and can move up to the table for this discussion.
You can't see us. They're here. Thank you, Nick.
All right, thank you.
Evening, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, at the moment, I cannot share my screen.
Let me stop sharing and then you can. Sorry about that.
Okay. Okay, can you all see the screen here now? Let's see, try that.
Yep.
Yes.
There it is. There it is.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Well, my name is Zach Gray. I'm with KPFF Consulting Engineers in Seattle, and I'm the project manager for the consultant team hired by Kitsap Transit to be here and present to you on our project tonight. As Nick mentioned, I believe Ed and Chris are there with you from Kitsap Transit. I will go ahead and let you guys introduce yourselves there.
Oh, I'm Ed Coviello and co-lead on the project. I'm a long-range planner with Kitsap Transit.
I'm Chris Browning, co-lead on the project. I am grants and compliance coordinator with
Great, thank you. Okay, so the intent tonight is just to walk the council through our the status of our project at the moment. The presentation that you see in front of you here this evening is the same presentation that we ran through with Kitsap Transit's Board of Commissioners about a month and a half ago. And so the intent is, again, just to update the staff and council here on what we're proposing, what we're studying, what we've been doing to date, and kind of give everyone just a glimpse into the transit center siting effort for the downtown Port Orchard waterfront area. So we have developed a purpose and need. I'm not necessarily going to read line by line here, but in essence, we know that there is a need for an expanded transit center in the downtown Port Orchard area to increase bus capacity, provide increased capacity for passengers, improve rider and driver amenities, and provide for safer traffic patterns. Additionally, what's important to this project is integration with the downtown Port Orchard sub-area plan. That's a big component to what we're doing in terms of the work that's been done to date and all of the efforts to look at that waterfront area and make sure that whatever we're trying to promote allows for sustainable growth and livability in that downtown area. We know that there's a need for a transit facility in this vicinity. As we all know, the Kitsap County area is growing. We expect growth to be approximately 100,000 residents and 57,000 jobs over the next 30 years. And much of this growth will be concentrated in the downtown or in the Port Orchard and Bremerton area. Kitsap County recently surpassed 300,000 residents at the end of 22. So I think we all know that there's growth happening, and we want to be able to provide for a nice transportation facility that will allow for great connectivity for fixed route buses in the area around the different routes that are serving the community there, as well as connecting up with the existing foot ferry system that Kitsap Transit operates. So key considerations to our transit center siting study work to date have been that the Port Orchard Transit Center needs to be located within a quarter mile of the existing Port Orchard Foot Ferry Dock. We know that the new Port Orchard Community Events Center is opening at the former Kitsap Bank site on the west end of town. The existing Port Orchard Regional Library will relocate into that events center when the time comes and vacate the existing building near the existing Foot Ferry Dock. The Port Orchard Farmers Market will be relocating as well in proximity to the new events center. And again, important here is that the transit center does fit within the context of the downtown Port Orchard sub-area plan. So in front of us here is a map showing that quarter-mile radius around the existing Foot Ferry Dock. I'll try and zoom in here a little bit for those like myself who may not be able to see it as well on a big screen. To date, we've been looking at 4 different sites along the downtown waterfront area. And so those are labeled with a star here, and then you can again see where these are at in proximity to the existing Foot Ferry Dock.
Just a quick question before we move on. Where did the quarter-mile radius next to the Port Orchard Foot Ferry Dock, where did that goal come to light?
I can answer that. Right now there's a very seamless transfer between the buses and the ferry operations, and that's a good chunk of the ridership that we have. So we're trying to keep it within a walkshed, essentially a reasonable walkshed of that transfer. We don't want to move the transit center too far away from the dock. Accessibility is a really big deal here, and if this project comes through, we want to improve accessibility.
I can see where the need for transit down there, but why would you need a large transit center there? Where's the difference there? I mean, one of the things we've talked about as a council, just looking at downtown Port Orchard, is trying to get, if you look at the way downtown's laid out on the waterfront, right? There's too much parking, there's too much vehicles, it's just kind of backwards. And so for everything we've been talking about for at least the 8 years I've been on council is to try to create more pedestrian friendly, more green space, more access to the waterfront. And all of a sudden this seems to be kind of coming out of nowhere. Instead we're going to put a big transit center to increase, vehicles on our waterfront.
Yeah, and I think the idea is to decrease the vehicles by allowing initial capacity for.
So I hear what you're saying. I mean, we would still need buses to go through there, but do we need the transit center there? Go ahead, Scott.
No, I was going to agree. It seems like the quarter mile only exists if you've already decided that that's where the transit center is going to be.
That's a general area that we would like it.
Yeah, and I understand that makes sense, the walkability component to that. But I don't know that we've really talked about this. So stepping back a little bit, the park and ride lot that's slated to go over by Lowe's and Safeway, that was, when we were talking about developing that was meant to help provide some disincentives to parking downtown when that's done. And so, and the reason for that was there was some general thoughts about trying to redevelop that waterfront area with less parking, but more green space, open space, recreational opportunity. This is just trading one gray field for another. And so this was all news to me, and I think, I can't speak for everybody, but I think it's going to require a lot of work study time to try and.
It's going to, yeah. We've been in discussions with the Port of Bremerton as well. It'll have impacts if it's constructed on them. And, we're really early on in the process, and that's why we're coming out here to get your input and to record that, so we're sensitive to the need.
So question for the other council members. So is the elephant in the room the disposition of the former library, do you think? Or site 1 on this map?
I think the elephant room is a transfer station downtown on the water.
No, I don't think it's disposition at all, because we're relocating the library to a better location.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking at it. So what else could that property be?
Well, that's the question, because I think that we want to evaluate what is the best and highest use of that property, and it's almost like we're assuming it's going to just go to transit, because they want a center downtown.
We're not assuming anything, it's the first we've heard of it, so.
The other
Starts the
thing too
conversation.
is that Kitsap Transit does have a portion of that building now. I mean, that's a given.
Satellite
I
office.
would, one of the things things that I would ask as we move into discussions about it is the ridership that comes down there, because anecdotally, if you're there from 5:30 to 7:30 in the morning, there is nobody that's parking down there to catch the ferries. They're all using buses. And so it alleviates a lot of the parking issues downtown by using it. The question is, and I agree with Sean, what's the best use of space of we want it? So there's a lot of, I think there's a lot more information that we need and data to back it up. I think this is more just dipping the toe in the water.
Yeah, and I want to highlight in the city's comprehensive plan and in Vision 2050 from the Puget Sound Regional Council, they're recommending putting 65–70% of the growth around transit facilities and along high-capacity transit corridors. So the Bethel corridor is identified as a high-capacity transit corridor, and have it directly feed right into this proposed or planned, I don't know how you want to call it, transit facility. And so we're trying to think, 40 years from now, what will the city need, and how can the transit facility serve as a catalyst for redevelopment?
So make a comparison to, because you're also looking to build a new transit center to Bowling Alley off of Kitsap Way, is that right?
That's more of a parking ride, but yeah.
More of a parking ride. Just, I would think that today there are more people going downtown Bremer to the ferry terminals, because not only do you have transits, but you also have walk areas.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the difference in that type of a flow with just buses only, because you're not a transit center?
The flow for the West Bremerton site?
Just to getting into downtown Bremerton versus getting into, like this would be downtown Bremerton.
What's the difference? I guess, you could say volume perhaps.
More volume Bremerton, right?
For now, but the amount of growth that's coming into this city is quite a bit, so I can't predict the future on that, but.
But look where the growth's occurring. It's not occurring residentially downtown.
Yeah.
No, but it's occurring, Bethel's growing, and that site down on Sedgwick, around that sub-area plan, the Ruby Creek, that's growing. So the idea is people can live out there and get to their destination downtown easily, and then transfer if they want to go over to Bremerton or Seattle or Stuttgart, that kind of thing.
All right.
Well,
We definitely are
Yeah.
going, go ahead. Did you have something, Mark?
Nick's got his hand raised.
Oh, Nick, I'm sorry, I missed it, Nick.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that conversation that I think a big difference between sending people to a transit center so that one bus can go downtown and transfer them to the ferry means that they're switching twice to get to an end destination, which is employment opportunities in Bremerton. And so right now, today, we have a transit center downtown. It just isn't a very effective one, and there isn't room for expansion in service because of the limited space that's available. And the city also utilizes the centers approach to planning, where we have all of these centers scattered around our city, and those centers are generating traffic that needs to be able to walk outside, get on a bus, and with one transfer get to employment in Bremerton or even possibly onto Seattle. And I think the talk of having a decentralized transit center starts to make transit a much less attractive option when you're adding additional places where you have to transfer from one bus to another in order to make your connection.
I hear that, but I still think that this is something that needs to be worked out in another study session, but so the council can have input on that. Because location is really important, and I'm not sure we're all agreeing on what transportation will look like in the future even. So anyway, this is a lot of new information. Scott, go ahead.
For me, it just boils down to what is the vision that we have for our waterfront, which is widely acknowledged as the jewel of Port Orchard. And do we want a transfer station on the waterfront? I'm not sure that we do, and it'd be interesting to hear from the public on whether they feel that we should as well.
Well, especially if you think of what the Bremerton transfer center is, where there's nothing there for people to actually, well, I shouldn't say nothing. I mean, there's the French fry place, but there isn't a lot of amenities, which we seem to have here. So, yeah, it's not an attractive immediate fit.
Right.
And we don't intend to build a large, concrete, massive structure. I mean, I think the key is, I look at it as a planner, that this needs to be scaled to fit what you want as a community. And it needs to complement and enhance the waterfront. And I think there's opportunity here to enhance the waterfront. Right now, there's a essentially a sidewalk and a dilapidated bus shelter. We're gonna have to move that facility back minimum of 25 feet from the waterfront. That opens up a whole corridor. And these are just concepts on here.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we are already having revitalization start with the community event center, the location of the new bank, and then all of the work with the Marina Pump Station and what's going on there. So it's possible that as these projects start to go, we're going to have a lot of interest in the downtown area that hasn't been here before. And we may not have room for a transit center in that area. But you know what? That's all to be discussed. I think, again, the whole point is we haven't seen this. It's
Thanks
pretty
for
new.
coming this evening. Start the conversation.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
we're years away. This is just to find 3 alternative locations so we could begin to bring this to the feds, to begin to the environmental review process. So we've got many years to get this through.
Could you spend a little time looking at other areas, places like Bethel, other, corridors, and maybe come back and explain the pros and cons of those? I mean,
Absolutely.
We're not transit experts. I'm
Sure.
pretending to be, and so it'd be interesting to say, hey, we've got one here on Bethel. This is what, the pros and cons are.
So outside
Downtown
that,
pros and
outside
cons.
the
Yeah,
downtown
just-
area.
Right. Or like
Yeah, I'm
Annapolis,
not
for
so sure
instance.
I just like the option of a quarter mile within that terminal.
there
I
any
just think it's
advantages
fairly
to-
limiting that I'm not able to understand, I think, just what it looks like in other areas of the city.
Right. And a lot
Yeah, I
of what we're envisioning for downtown Port Orchard is walkability. Not a lot of transit and a lot of that kind of movement exactly. But there's a lot to be discussed and looked at.
Will you be discussing the difference for the 4 sites?
I think Zach should.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay, maybe-
I know
yeah.
we're limited on time, and I just wanted to, be respectful of that. We do have a couple of options that we've been studying relative to what these transit loops could look like. And again, these are just high-level concept studies. We're working with Hewitt Architects, and as Ed mentioned, the intent would be to really have something that's special for the downtown waterfront area and create a place and really make this something that, is a focal point for the waterfront. So we've got 2 or 3 options that we've been looking at for Site 1, which is around the existing transit center there and the existing building site, library site that is. This option would continue to utilize Sydney for all bus traffic. We've got another option here that looks at Harrison. So trying to think about traffic, how it comes in and out, how it circulates. A third option, if you will, that looks at something where we, again, enter in off of Harrison and exit on Sydney. We're looking at, scalability. So could we actually put something in and then have the opportunity to widen or expand in the future? So just thinking about forward compatibility or future proofing. With each of these options, we're trying to consider transit-oriented development. So that is something from a massing standpoint that the team has been looking at just to see how that, starts to feel, if that's, something that is of interest for the city and others there. So that's Site 1. Site 3 is over near the existing Port of Bremerton parking lot area. And we know that there's challenges there with the intersection of Harrison and Bay that would require some type of signalized improvement or roundabout potentially, which has, a lot of impacts for Bay Street. So again, trying to think about access. And as Ed mentioned, more recently, there have been conversations with the Port of Bremerton. We recognize that parking impact is a big concern for the port and the marina. Access to the waterfront is a key issue, making sure that, whatever we look at considers access, public access, and then also parkland impacts to that existing park area. And again, just scalability. Does it, scale with the context of what we're trying to do with the waterfront area there? So those were the options that we've studied to date. There's going to be additional study work, of course, and additional analysis to look at these sites and then work with key stakeholders to, keep people informed and share information and move towards a preferred alternative at some point.
Just one more comment, maybe when we talk about this again, are you able to share data with today? Where are people originating from and where are they going? Right, just again, just information for us to better understand kind of the need, and, you know, I'm sure that's changed over the last 5 years with the said growth that we just talked about today, and so it'd be interesting to get kind of a current snapshot with it. So we've had significant development here in Port Orchard in the last 5-6 years, and it'd be interesting to take a snapshot today, you know, who's using it from the west side, who's using it from the, you know, downtown area, the Bethel area, and then Mount Hillary, you know what I mean, and just understand the flow of what routes they're on and where they're going. How many of them are even headed to a ferry today? I don't know.
I think that was kind of part of our process too, is that for people that are living in parts of South Kitsap, that they can potentially maybe park at a park and ride and catch a single bus and go all the way to this transit center, sorry, I'm trying to phase that word out, and then take the ferry from the dock to the Bremerton Transit Center and then be on their way from there.
Or transfer to another bus.
Yeah,
somewhere
whether-
else in the city.
Yeah, or they could take, you know, transfer from that ferry to the fast ferry, or transfer from that ferry to the shipyard. I think it would make an impact for commuters. I think it would cut down on traffic just going around Gorst, which
So
is,
again, if we're bringing somebody from somewhere in South Kitsap down towards the ferry terminal, but they're not gonna get on a ferry terminal, they're just gonna transfer to go somewhere else, what's the difference than if they transfer center was on Bethel?
That's a good point.
There you go, that's
So
what
in
I'm
our-
saying, I don't understand the.
yeah, that is a good point.
In our long-range
Spoke with
transit
the
plan,
wheels.
right now, Port Orchard has spokes and a hub right downtown. It doesn't have a rim. So in our long-range transit plan, one of the ideas behind locating the park and ride out at Sydney, which will also feature some building pads for mixed-use development around there that will sell off, is the ability to build a rim route along Sedgwick connecting to Bethel. And maybe in the future, hopefully one along Lund, so we can start get some of the cross-pollination, I suppose you could call it.
Yeah.
And to answer the question about origins and destinations, we did receive grant funding, and I'm not sure exactly when this year we're gonna begin to do an origin and destination survey. So we'll have some really good data about where people are coming from and going to. And I hope we can share that with you.
I know, maybe it's just, like, you gotta start the conversation, but that new park and ride, I think there's just unanimous support, it makes so much sense, right, the need out there. I think this just caught us off guard, that this really, the sighting of this is so small.
And then any parking, we have to mitigate by law, we have to replace it. So any parking we take away, we have to replace it and pay for that and all the relocation, et cetera. Sorry.
I just was gonna ask if you could add to your sites the Bruce Titus site. I know that Titus Ford, I know that he's trying to figure out his role in an EV world, and whether they need such a large footprint. They have bought into they were required by a certain date to buy into EV sales with Ford, and they did do that. And then there's the property across the street, which has some challenges as well, so maybe some cleanup challenges. But the question is, with Bruce, are they thinking that you're gonna need all that property in the future? You know, they've looked at trying to move their operations out of there. So I think there might be some opportunity there that keeps it off the waterfront as well. And it might be a good reuse of the land across the street if that were to be.
Especially with what we learned last week with the new laws that were passed with the connection of streams to water.
Right.
Yes.
That makes some of these properties that were no longer viable or that weren't viable for those types of uses now are becoming viable, that might even be more realistic.
And we did an online survey recently, and so we'll share those results as they come in. One of the things that people valued, because most of the people answering the survey were riders or connected to transit in some way, they do really appreciate that ease of connection to the ferries. Generally in transit, when transfers happen in a small urban market like this, we lose up to 50% of our ridership, but we're gonna try to cite some sources and studies on that in the pros and cons to show you how that affects things.
I just wanted to make sure that you guys had it on your radar too, that remember that we have a very critical lift station in the parking lot at Titus Ford. And that's one of the things that I'm applying for funding now to be able to move that.
Across the street.
So, across the street and down towards Rockwell, to get it away from the Blackjack Creek area, so if there is an overspill, so.
There certainly is more discussion to be had, and a lot of good ideas already coming forward, so.
Great to start the conversation, well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Ash.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Nick, is there anything else you want to add, or Zach?
No, I think we should probably keep this on the agenda and continue discussing it with the full council when everyone else returns.
Sounds good, thank you. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, community needs assessment. Looks like Tony is here to present. Have a seat. It's all warmed up.
You can tell me, hey, it's more than that. I couldn't have asked for a better intersection of what we're about to talk about than Kitsap Transit and the county. So, because it all ties together, and I'm pretty excited for this. Just stick around.
Thank you.
So, thanks for having me, all right? Really appreciate it. This is the needs assessment. It's the hard copy. It's pretty cool. I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to talk about the Housing Task Force and even Kitsap Transit, because it all ties together to what we're all trying to do. All right. So I'm Tony Ives. I'm with KCR, Kitsap Community Resources, and again, thanks for having me. So this survey was extensive. There were 4,200 respondents. There were really more than that, but we cleaned up the data to make sure that we eliminated some things. So 4,200 respondents across demographics, across Kitsap County. And one thing that's relevant to what Kitsap Transit was asking, what somebody asked here, was we did it by zip code where you worked, and zip code where you live, just to try to identify where people need to go. And that's definitely relevant to Kitsap Transit, and we've already had that conversation. They're talking about their next strategic plan. They're using our data, the hard data, to hopefully help develop something of a long-term strategy. I think we're all going to do that. Anyway, so we did it by race, age group, income, all types of things. And there's a dashboard that everybody will be able to just zero in to whatever zip code you're looking for, whatever demographic you're looking for, and identify the respondents. Next, please. So who participated in the we had focus groups. We thought it was relevant to capture the qualitative data as well, not just the quantitative data. So in all, we had 10 focus groups: general community, with the African American community, service providers. We also did mom-speaking communities and Spanish communities, as well as people experiencing homelessness. And in fact, that one probably had about 35 participants, which is very, very interesting. And also the tribal community members. We went out to Suquamish, and there were about 20 people in that room. One thing that was very interesting in that focus group was something was said that about middle class and how people aren't, middle class isn't what they used to be, specifically with housing, and people can't afford to live. But I'm going to talk more about that in a bit. So, what are the basic challenges? What did we find? Okay, challenges meeting basic needs. There's a disconnect between services and the people that we serve, and barriers to accessing healthcare. And at the end, I'm going to talk specifically about Port Orchard and South Kitsap, okay? So, challenges meeting basic needs. So cost was really the primary barrier for respondents. Just housing, food, reliable transportation, and childcare. And really, of these basic needs, housing impacted most with 35%. So you see the quantitative data there, N equals 1,971. That's reporting the cost of rent or our house payment as a major housing concern. Participants in the 8 focus groups also really talked about that as well, affordable housing, but it was even more than that. They talked about weatherization for the elderly. They talked about transportation to the hospital, especially on a Sunday, and how difficult that was. I'm going to discuss that a little more later too. There's one quote I want to emphasize. This came from one of our focus groups. We need affordable housing, transportation, better shelters because I was in one. They banned me permanently because I'm incontinent. They banned me permanently, so I was sleeping outside. This particular person, we actually, I won't mention her name, but we actually found her. And through rental assistance, we just put her into a place for 90 days, really, to spend some of the money that's about to run out in order to have a bridge. So hopefully after that 90-day period or during that 90-day period, we can find a permanent situation for her. So that's what we're looking for. But we found her in one of the focus groups. Next, please. So really there's a disconnect between services and people they serve, or we serve, I should say. So during these focus groups, I basically sat quiet because the idea of the community needs assessment, we're supposed to do this every 3 years or so by charter, Department of Commerce and the Washington State Community Action Agencies. So I wanted people to be as critical as they wanted to be about KCR. And we found some very telling things, not just about us, but about our partners and about how we interact with each other. So eligibility concerns is one of them. Being ineligible or not qualifying for help. So at the beginning of the year, remember some of our congressmen asked, hey, what are you guys looking for? What are the top needs from the community? One of them was just about eligibility, 130% of income, 150%, 200%. We're just trying to normalize what that eligibility is. There are some times where people are just right on the edge and they become ineligible and we can't support them, but we try to find a way to do that. So that is a big concern. Communication concerns, that's the second one. And all of the focus groups, all 10 of them, there were communication concerns. That includes how to fill out the application for housing, talking about ourselves, right, for the Housing Solution Centers. That includes interpreters in the hospitals like St. Michael's. We talked directly about that to Chad, just trying to understand how to improve services, right? And also really under that communications, better integration of communication with us and all the agencies that we work with. So I really think poor interagency communication and collaboration is just adding to such a significant burden to those that need, deserve, qualify, and want services in general. And I think that comment was directed at us, but also other agencies. So we have to learn to work together. I'll give you an example, and it's not a criticism of KCR, it's just a realization that we're siloed. Head Start is here, housing is here, weatherization is here, and now part of our strategic plan going forward is to be more integrated in our approach and how we serve people. So they're not doing it over and over again. Barriers to accessing healthcare. Man, this one was a big one, and St. Michael's recognizes it. Appointment wait times were reported as a primary barrier to accessing and needing mental health counseling and medical care in general. Also, participants at all of the focus groups, all 10 of them, said just receiving health care, there's month-long wait times, and mental health visits are very difficult to get, fear of medical bills, and also just the previous fear of experiences before. I'm gonna read this quote. I can't find services here for my kids. I can't find doctors that will bring them in. My kids are on state, which is like Molina or Apple Care, and nobody takes it anymore in Kitsap County. That's a big deal that became apparent in the needs assessment.
Tony?
Yes?
Have you seen this as being worse since the pandemic? Because it seems that...
I think the pandemic, I think it's just adding to it, right? And there's a lot of fear in the community right now because the pandemic money is going away. So now, the last 3 years have been tough for everybody in this room, and everybody that responded to this survey, that's for sure. But
I was just wondering on the medical care end, it seems that for whatever reason, care seems to have gotten more difficult.
I can
know
try to
if that
speak
came
for
out.
St. Michael's,
No.
but I'm not going to.
Yeah.
But I can say that we all recognize it, and just as an example of how everybody's going to take this data and build on it. So they were one of the first ones to reach out to us and said, "Can we get the hard data?" so they can build on their own needs assessment. Kids Up Transit did the same thing. They asked us that as soon as it came out, can they see the data? With KPHD, the data is available. We're not just get it out because that's the point. So everybody can use it and build on it, so we're not reinventing the wheel. So the answer is, you know, we're working on it. Everybody recognizes it's a problem, and hopefully this will go some way to fixing that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Next. Okay, so what can we do? So these were really generated from the focus groups. So the first one, develop a directory of resources for the community. Frankly, there is one, and it's quite extensive, but it's in English. And when I heard this, I thought this one was one we could solve right away. I speak Spanish, so I looked at it myself, and I'm like, oh boy, just translating that, it's not easy to do because it just doesn't translate well. I called the Department of Commerce because they offer free translation services. In fact, they did translation for us in 4 different languages for the needs assessment for the survey. Spanish, Tagalog, Mom, well, not Mom, I'm missing one, Spanish, Tagalog, English, Kurdish, for the refugees that come over in the Islamic community. So we knew Commerce could do that, but they looked at the resource guide that they had, and we knew it was going to take some work. But if people can't read or understand the book to access services, that becomes a barrier. So number 2, improve access to services that provide basic needs. That goes internal with KCR because we act as the nexus to many of the services that go on here in Kitsap County. And number 3, build and maintain strong partnerships with community, healthcare, and tribal organizations. Frankly, I apologize for not coming here sooner to speak. When I showed up last month, it was just because I wanted to be here. And then I realized you were talking about our staff and what we do with you guys. So I'm really happy that the mayor invited me out, and I appreciate it. So we want to be tighter with the city of Port Orchard. Kitsap County are already one of our strong partners, especially in housing and everything else that we're about to do or that we're trying to do. Okay, I'm not going to read the quotes. Let's just keep going. Outreach strategy. We did something really unique. So notice when we first started this back in March of last year, I remember Lori Maxim from Fishline. She used to be the ED there, and she just recently left. She said, oh, you'll be lucky if you get 500 respondents. Nobody thought we could do it like this, but we did grassroots level, reached out to all our community partners. Kitsap County put it on their website, a lot of other folks. I went to churches, all the organizations, and we did a really big job, good job getting it out there. But really, it was our digital outreach. So we distributed flyers with QR codes. Okay, we had iPads at all the events, so people could just hit the QR code and fill out the survey right away. We proactively engaged with organizations across Kitsap County. We reached out to all the support groups, all the tribes. Everybody was helping us do this. KRL was one of our strong partners. We would frankly go and table at the regional library, just like the census, and sit there and have people fill out the survey. And KRL really helped us do that. And really, our Facebook was really great. Our messaging, just trying to get people, even in the focus group. So the focus groups, for example, we paid folks $25 for their gift cards, bought pizza for everybody, so we weren't wasting anybody's time. So people wanted to come and they wanted to share information with us. And it was an eye-opening experience, even for KPHD and everybody that was involved in this. You know, people have families. We even provided childcare, so moms can bring their kids, and we put them in another room with games because we have a Head Start program, right? So it really helped take off some pressure for families that wanted to participate in this. So other outreach, you know, targeted advertisements on Instagram and Facebook, and, you know, utilize email subscriber lists. We really built up a nice network there, and the link was always displayed. And then, yeah, we shared the surveys with all the organizations that we work with. We're probably 40 or 50. Next slide. Are you doing this?
No, I'm
okay.
I'm trying to stay with you, is all.
The mayor will just be
So So the
I
story.
thought maybe you couldn't see it well, so
No,
I was
no,
trying
no,
to
no,
stay in
that's
the right
great.
place.
So, you know, what we were trying to do was connect with the underserved populations. What I had heard in Kitsap County was every time a survey is done, you know, there's only a few people that do it, and it's a homogenous demographic, maybe everybody in Bainbridge Island, you know, and we tried to do something a little different. Also, our point was to share this information, not just capture it for ourselves, because that's how we used to do it. That's how KCR used to do it. That's how a lot of organizations do it. But we created an open, basically an open database that anybody can use. And our biggest point was not reinventing the wheel, just making sure that everybody can use the hard data and build on it. So I got to talk to you about this one. When we first started this, there were maybe 5 of us in that room, Dr. Gibb, myself, Siri, and 2 other people. We were talking about how could we make this a project, not just a one-off project, but something to build on. And really, okay, let's run it like the census. Let's use the hard data. Everybody can share it, no problem. And then we create this dashboard so people can use it. So the next time somebody does a survey, they're not just doing it again. They're finding the questions that we didn't ask, or they're looking at data that was asked and they want to ask the same question again. Basically, originally this survey was about 110 questions. Nobody's going to spend that much time. We narrowed it down to about 63 or 64, and a lot of people partnered, including the school district, helping us put some of the questions together. All right. So, specific needs need to be addressed, and I'm going to just use specific examples here. Franciscan Medical, basically, they came right out and said, look, give us the data. We want the data. We want to build on it. Puget Sound Energy did the same thing. Puget Sound Energy wants to push solar and sustainable energy here into Kitsap County. They came to my office, frankly, and asked us about the survey. Right away, they gave us $15,000 to help push it out some more, and they're using the data to really understand the demographic and how they can best target the energy sustainability in Kitsap County, and I think all the cities are very interested in that idea. And of course, Kitsap Transit. Seriously, you guys, we had a meeting with you guys towards the end of the survey, and we were talking about the idea of the 3 to 5 year strategic plan that they're being developed. So the where you work, the zip code where you work, and the zip code where you live. I'm going to give you a really good example of that. There's a project in Kingston that's maybe 2 or 3 years out. It's maybe be approved, I really don't know. But it's an idea. It's 250 units, maybe 75% of them are affordable housing. However, there's only one bus that goes down to the ferry once a day. And so people can't get down there. And there's no parking down there. So talking to Kitsap Transit, it's like, okay, maybe 3 years out, you can have 3 times the service coming down. Of course, there's no drivers right now, but now we're planning for long term based on the data that you see here, where people live and where people work. And that's just an example. Kitsap County, Port Orchard is another example. Now, before I move on, I'm gonna speak to that. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, before I go there, let's just talk specifically about Port Orchard. So, South Kitsap, these are the key findings. Challenges meeting basic needs for South Kitsap survey participants. Among South Kitsap survey participants, there were higher percentages who reported challenges meeting basic needs for reliable transportation and support for their children than among all the other participants in the survey across the county. I thought that was very interesting. And sub-points of that, of all the participants who reported no public transportation near me as a barrier to reliable transportation, about 316 participants, nearly 1 in 3, that's about 29%, were from South Kitsap. And that's relevant and that's significant. That's why I love this conversation that we're all here together talking about it, right? Of course, childcare, 26% of the folks here that responded said childcare was a problem. Cost is too high, 44%. Hours not flexible enough for my schedule. Too far away, don't have transportation. Here it is again, and not satisfied with quality of care. So barriers to accessing healthcare is also significant here in South Kitsap. I'm gonna encourage everybody here to flip through this dashboard and even look at the hard copy. We'll leave this one here with you guys, but it's on our website, it's on the KPHD website, there's a great link, and it's a beautiful document, and it's something that's never been done here, and we had a lot of help, a lot of partners, right down to Kayak, the county, the Department of Commerce. There were probably Kitsap Community Foundation, Bainbridge Island Foundation, Fish Line, they gave us $5,000, United Way. Everybody came together to help fund this because everyone's gonna use the data. So I'm gonna segue to the next thing. We were talking about housing and how important housing is. I think the last time I was here, I just briefly mentioned the housing task force that we're trying to develop. Actually, not trying to develop, we already did. We're about a year into this now. We have about 100 participants, maybe even more than that. Derek Kimmer's office, Patty Mary's office, people are involved because they want to understand what the need is. So our idea here with the task force basically split it up into 3 areas. There's one data committee. They got a lot of the data from the report that you guys were talking about earlier from the county. The second one was the pipeline. Right now there's about 22 projects in the pipeline that represent about 700 units. We saw a project today, my friend Jill Stanton and I, that also represents maybe another 700 units. That's not here in Port Orchard, but there are projects around. In Port Orchard, I will just say the county is so interested in this whole pipeline. I got a call from the county maybe about 3 weeks ago and said, hey Tony, there's an affordable housing project, maybe about 86 units up on 5 Mile here. We should put that on the pipeline. The guy called, yes, let's just put it up there just so we know what the interest is and maybe there's a way to get funding. So let me stick to the slide here, okay? So the idea, wait, go back. Okay, so government advocacy, that's my job, trying to get the funding. The housing data, so the 3 of us that started this was Joe Crane from St. Vincent de Paul, Jill Stanton from BHA, and actually Doug Washburn, because we were all in the same room together, and Jill said, hey, you guys should go see a project, and Doug and I went out there the very next day and saw the project, which is Mills Crossing. We closed on that on Friday, 36 affordable housing. We piecemealed that funding together, so it's essentially all grant money from 5 different sources, which makes it sustainable for an organization like ourselves with permanent supportive housing right behind it, right? So that's all feeds into the same thing of what you're trying to do. So right now, I mean, I'm serious. We have meetings. Our last meeting was last week, and we were trying to bring all the committees together because we haven't done it in a while. And now the idea is to leverage funding. So go to the next slide. I'm not even sure I'm going to talk about it, but I am going to talk about it. Strategic plan. We have to develop our strategic plan, and everybody else has to do the same thing. For us, we're in this process right now, but we know what we want to do, and housing is a central focus to that. I looked at, okay, I've only been at KCR for about 19 months, but about 6 years ago, it was part of our strategic plan, developing housing. Well, now here we are with some key partners, including Kitsap Transit, that we're trying to do that. So we can't do it by ourselves. Even the SIA funding, that's not enough. And somebody asked a question about number of applications. The idea that we're trying to formulate is not competing against each other, but collaborating and cooperating. So basically having a pipeline of projects, seeing where you are in the line, or if you're ready, if you're not, if you had your permitting done, whatever it is, if it's a project that's 3 months out or 3 years out, and putting together a portfolio of projects. So we've already met with Commerce. Commerce knows what we're doing. They're waiting for us, right? You guys know what we're doing. We're all in this together. The SIA funding, it came out, we were too late because the county has to spend the money. Next year may be something different. Amazon, the Amazon Housing Equity Fund. Jill and I went over to Seattle. The executive director, she flew out from DC and met with us. You know what she said? Where is Kitsap County? And we said, well, you guys have an Amazon distribution center right here, and your staff can't even afford to live here, right? But it was very interesting. They're going to come back out in August and meet with us. So they basically have $2 billion worth of funding. They did a first round, $500 million. Puget Sound is one of 3 areas in the United States that are dedicated for that funding. We're trying to draw people in here, and they're one of them. So now they know who we are, right? And the next round of funding, $500 million, comes out in the 3rd quarter. We want to be ready. So our idea, we were talking about that today, is to get a portfolio of projects. So maybe there's 5 of us, and we just have to figure that out. Not me, we don't need any more money, KCR. We're looking to support everybody else in the endeavor in housing, including especially here in Port Orchard, right? So we could portfolio 5, 6, 7 projects together that represent X number of units, and how much is that? So now we talk about not at 1 year off, not 5 million, but maybe that number is 200 million over 5 years. So some of it comes from Commerce. They have 3 pots of funding now. One's the Rapid Housing, one's Housing Trust Fund, and one is the Apple Health and Home, which is permanent supportive housing. They've restructured, they know what we're doing, and I sit on one of those committees now with Kirsten Jules. She sits on another. So I feel like Port Orchard here and Kitsap County, we've got some influence, and we're trying to do something unique, and everybody sees it. So that's where we're at, and I'm super excited, and I'm more than optimistic to be a part of this. Okay? Yes.
So one of the barriers in the earlier slides is length of time for medical services, which I think that exists across healthcare providers and HMOs as well. There's a doctor shortage. I was talking to a doctor recently, and he said that they had, in the local clinic alone, they had a departure of around 10 doctors in the last several months. And so they're struggling with trying to maintain the caseload. Everybody's been assigned extra patients. They're hoping for new doctors to come in, and there's a bit of a light at the end of the tunnel there. But what do you do about that?
So just, there was one comment that still sticks out in my head, and this person and her husband were in the room, and she was probably 5 months pregnant, and she said her doctor, her OBGYN, was retiring, and she had no place to go. They were going all the way to Kitsap, to Gig Harbor, even though they lived in Paulsville, right? And I don't have the answer to that. I don't have the solution. And that's a Chad question, right? But for us, at least we identified, we have the data that says that's significant. That's a significant factor. So all I can do is work with our partners in KCR and do what we do as far as services, and hopefully provide data for everybody else. And we're all working together to solve a central issue, which isn't just housing, it's medical care, transportation, everything else.
Well, thank you very much.
No, thank you.
Clearly you're passionate about this.
Yeah, I love
Yeah,
that.
energy is awesome. Well,
So
one
thank
quick
you.
question for you, something that we've discussed a lot, and I feel strongly this way, that, the term affordable housing, I think is, I just don't like it.
Yeah,
just
I don't
know that
either.
it's possible.
Do you know what? Teachers can't even afford housing.
Right.
Our firefighters,
It's
right?
It's like almost setting us up to fail if we use that word, and I'm just wondering, is there conversations going on with just stigma? Because now we talk about supportive housing or subsidized housing, or, you know what I mean, where it kind of creates more silos. Is there a way that we can almost rebrand these efforts to make it more widely accepted?
Yeah, that's a Joel question, but I appreciate the question. You know why? Because even Mills Crossing, when we were in the purchase, when we started the idea, some of the residents that live there kind of freaked out, affordable housing, what does that mean? But I must say, housing, whatever that is, whatever you make, you should be able to live in dignity and with respect. And the term, though, boy, this project has moved so quickly, and honestly, this isn't my expertise, but I agree with you. There probably should be a change in terminology.
Kind of like healthcare, right? The idea of affordable healthcare right now today, I think we're misguided, right?
That's a
And
misnomer.
So we need to have subsidized healthcare, but is there a new way to, maybe a fresher way to speak to that?
You tell me, because let's have this discussion.
You do the same.
No, let's have this discussion. I agree.
Yeah.
Something more optimistic, more positive, not a stigma.
Well, and it's getting used to death.
Just like I'm on a journey, or.
It's almost like it's pacifying, they're thinking it's pacifying something, but it's not.
Well, even Mills Crossing, our project, we split it up. We made a deal with the Department of Commerce, basically 18 of the units are 30% AMI under, and then 16 of the units are 80% AMI. So area median income in Kitsap County, what's that, about $100,000 for a couple of two? Okay, well, now we're talking $80,000, and you know, a teacher and their husband can be in that place. You know what I mean? So even though it says affordable housing, what you said is right. People don't think like they're not thinking that way.
Well, thank you, Tony.
Yep.
We appreciate it, and we're gonna scoot
I'm
on
gonna leave this here, okay?
Thank you very
All right,
much.
you guys comment
to
on
some utilities.
Okay.
You're right,
Thank
all
you.
tied together.
Yeah, they are.
I'm
Thank
surprised
you
you,
very
I'm
much.
surprised you did it in one breath.
That's amazing.
I'm not surprised.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you, everyone, for coming. All right. Jackie, you're on.
I just wanted to let you know that this is the next step in moving forward with our compliance program. And I want to clarify that just a little bit. The city is completely in compliance with Department of Health, Department of Ecology, and we have been for at least 3.5 years. Every month, or every year, I send in the reports. We just, as you may know, we just discovered well 4 down here. The state is ecstatic with us that we've discovered that finally, and can kind of underscore that and put a period on the end of it. So this program is more to help the businesses and in some instances residents get in compliance with our regulations. So we're outlining things more clearly, and in the POMC. Charlie's opinion is that it needs to be in the municipal code. So that's what these 2 sections are about. You guys did the source control last about 9 months ago, I think. That was the stormwater piece, and this is the water piece and the sewer piece. The cross-connection program, of course, is to make sure once water goes through a meter, we don't want it back, you know, because we don't know what's happening to it on the other side. That's the utilities perspective. Further from that is DCD's perspective, where once water goes out of fixture, they don't want it back because there could be something, like for instance in a mortuary, there could be something over, and we want to make sure that that water doesn't come back in the building that could possibly contaminate someone. So we're partnering with DCD, Public Works is, to basically, because we're the experts on cross-connection control, whether it be at a building or in a building. And so we're going to work with them to oversee that part of the cross-connection program. The other side of it is FOG, Fat Soils and Grease, and that is specifically directed at food service establishments, because food service establishments create that problem that can damage and clog a collection system, a sewer collection system. So that's what these regulations are about, and I won't belabor it. You're probably very familiar with both of them by now because we've been talking about it for years, so if you have any questions, I'd be happy to.
Go ahead.
No,
No,
go
but
ahead, hand it first.
When I read through it, it was like, wow, that was a lot to digest. So the idea maybe to try to make it easier for our community to understand, I'm not so sure that it didn't really resonate with me, number one. Number two, how can we possibly enforce this with what we currently have? And I'm reading through
That's the
this going,
section, yes.
I mean, we would need 50 full-time staff members. And then like the fats and greases, and at what point I mean, I know we've got lots of restaurants, commercial operations that are creating these things, but what about the 15,000 homes that are cooking in their kitchen every day? I mean, it's like, and then I look at the fines and the compounding of the fines, and again, getting back to enforcement, and just it was a lot to take in.
Okay, so our plan going forward, all of this is kind of like not mandatory language, but things that have to be in there according to Charlie in order to be able to fit what's required by Department of Health, Department of Ecology for a water system or a sewer system, and to be able to enforce it. Yeah. Okay, so but our plan going forward is, of course, we've hired someone to be the utilities compliance, and he is developing materials that are basically plug and play, little cards that tell the basics of source control, the basics of cross connection, and the basics of FOG. So that depending on, we're trying to do this as a one-stop so that we don't go bother them, business or something, 3 or 4 different times. We can go out there and say, oh, you have a potential source control and you have a cross connection assembly. So let's educate you on those. So Brian will go and do those visits. One of the things that Port Orchard is behind in is that I can't find where there was ever a cross connection risk survey done, which was required back in the late 70s, okay? So that's one of the things that Brian's trying to work on. There's a thing, if you notice in here, it's called Table 13, it used to be Table 9, Table 13, which are high hazards. So he's concentrating on those. He's already been and visited the mortuaries in town. And remember that a lot of the businesses are in West Sound's utility district, not our water and sewer. So we don't even, that's their program, not ours. So that cuts down quite a bit of it. We also already have a list of, if memory serves, I want to say 400 cross-connection control assemblies that we're tracking, because as they've been installed, they have to have a plumbing permit, so they go through DCD and they report it to us. So we're already probably 3/4 of the way there. What's missing is that risk survey for cross-connection. And while we do that, then we can also hit the food service establishments and start educating them. Our plan is not to come in with a hammer, but to come in with some resources and give them time to get in, to educate them about what is going on and give them time. When we needed to have that compliance or fines and charges and stuff in there for those bad actors that simply won't comply. So.
So you and I are thinking a lot alike on this particular issue, but so one of the things that seemed clear to me is that we're going to be spending more time on this. How are we going to be capturing that with our fees?
Well, one of the things that I don't know if you guys have seen it yet, but I think it's coming up at the next meeting will be discussed, is I've asked for a scope and fee from FCS Group to do the sewer rates. That's the one piece. We've done the sewer CFCs, done the water CFCs and the water rates, but the sewer rates are still out there. So I've asked for a scope and budget for that. And in that scope and budget, I told them that we had these other fees that we needed to be looking at. Okay. So that will be studied. I think the contract's due to come up to you in the next month or so.
Yeah. And then I too, observed that at the beginning, the preface talks about, this being both a residential and a commercial problem. And so my question too is, well, what are we doing to help the residential owners be more informed? I mean, there's a...
There are backflow preventers in there.
The residents, it's generally people, it's primarily McCormick Woods, to tell you the truth, because most of those people out there have a separate residential irrigation meter. And so that's where their backflow assembly is on that irrigation meter. Because it used to be, prior to when we redid the water charges, that
irrigation meter.
Yes, an irrigation meter was free. There was no CFC charged on it, so they all got meters.
I think Rob has one.
So that's where most of those residential ones are. The only time that we require one on a residence is if they have maybe a photo developing studio as a hobby, something like that. Or the big one is whether if they have an alternate water source. For instance, somebody that had an old house, and they've decided to hook up to water on an existing, then we need to absolutely make sure that water can't get into our water system. That's primarily where they come in. And that's a matter of educating.
And then what about retrofit requirements? Are people vested? Let's talk about commercial business. Are they vested to their current treatment, and so they'll have to retrofit? And what sort of compliance window?
And it depends on the situation. Okay. And that's why we've built a lot of that into this. We can't let them be grandfathered in because it's a potential risk to health. If it's like I said, a mortuary that doesn't have the correct, backflow assembly, we could actually put really bad stuff into the water system, and it's damaging to the sewer system on the fog side. So there are going to be instances. A good case in point is the Bay Street Bistro. They had a small, because they started out as a very small business, right? So they had a small grease interceptor, but it was inadequate for what their volume of business is now. So there isn't any place to put one out there. So they ended up putting it it's in the sidewalk between the old R&H Theater, or whatever it's called now, or Dragonfly Theater, whatever. I remember it from the R&H way back. It's kind of in the sidewalk between. There's kind of a little bit of an alleyway thing. So we just have to kind of work through those issues. There are going to be issues. This is the outset of this program here, but as you know, I used to work in Longview. There were instances in Longview where there simply was not a way to put a backflow assembly in at the meter. There just simply wasn't, because the meter was literally up against the building. And the requirement is that it be outside the building. So we had to, you know, okay, well, we'll put it inside then. We'll put it in the fire service room. We'll put it somewhere so that we're comfortable, but that means we're gonna be working with the owner so that we can get access to it, to you know, to oversee it, right? Yeah. So it's just, it's a, you know, we're working through it. As long as the risk to public health, I mean, that's something I can't look away from. As long as the risk to public health is not something that I perceive as immediately dangerous, okay? And as long as the person is actively working towards trying to find a resolution, I'm willing to work with them. So, and I think that gives this gives us the flexibility to be able to do that.
What was this step go to more of the residential community? I mean, it's funny, I was talking to a friend of mine who's been a plumber for probably 55 years, and he just loathes the idea of a garbage disposal. It's like garbage goes in the garbage, not into your sink, right? And it just creates, you know, and I'm just wondering at what point, I mean, I've got to think that, you know, I don't know if, when you test things and you see the greases that are in there, when you think, just take McCormick was for example, because it's highly residential, you know, what is the contamination levels like there versus the contamination in an average restaurant, for example?
Well, that's why there's that one section in there that actually has numbers if it's this much loading and so on. And the thing is that we have a camera truck. So if we start having problems with a sewer line, then we can go out and look at it because we can see. I mean, we know what a grease blob looks like.
Sure.
And we can trace it out to where it's coming from. So if there's an instance like that, that's why those numbers are in there. The FOG regulations are directed toward food service establishments, but if we run across something like that, we at least have the ability to say, hey, you know, you guys either need to modify what you're doing or we're gonna have to do something about it because you're potentially damaging the sewer system.
With Bay Street Bistro, do you know how much that upgrade cost them?
I don't.
I mean, it can't be cheap.
No.
And it's definitely an impact to businesses, you know.
They don't even own the land between them and the theater, that belongs to the theater.
Yeah, I mean, that Count Palace Hub, yeah.
I think you answered most of the question I had, which was how do you even monitor the quality of backflow? And it sounds like you use your grease truck camera to see if there are effects that are.
Okay,
That's not two different things.
yeah, that's not, it's not the quality of backflow. Backflow is cut and dried.
Okay.
It has a
Long-term,
mechanical thing there, and it has to be tested once a year. It either passes or it fails.
Okay.
If it fails, it has to be fixed or replaced.
That's more voluntary compliance.
No,
By having
that's,
the equipment.
that's a requirement, that's a
Okay.
requirement. But we have, that's been going on since the late 70s in Washington State, and so that's pretty cut and dried, how we send out a letter, or what we're doing is, now we're changing what we do, rather than send a letter saying, hey, you have to have this done, we're partnering with the backflow assembly testing companies and saying, you do that initial one, so you retain your customer, and then we'll come in on the back end if they don't do it within a reasonable amount of time. So that we're, you know, partnering and cutting our costs while we're doing it. The other question you asked was?
How can you monitor if people are?
Well, they test.
Oh, yeah, what happens is they have to have, that's part of Brian's job once we get this program up and running, is they have to have a company come in periodically to clean out their grease trap or their grease interceptor, and they have to have a logbook of doing that. And so Brian's job will be to periodically stop in and go, hey, I want to see your logbook, you know, because each business has to decide for themselves. Like, for instance, something like La Palapa is going to have to be pumped more often than something like the old hometown cafe up here, right? Different type of clientele, different type of food.
Like the health district, right, where they come in, they do inspections, and they make sure that all your food temperatures, it's very similar.
Okay.
Right,
So
and we
it's
look
on-site.
at that log and see when was the last time it was pumped, and then pop open the thing. Because an unscrupulous pumper will just pump out the water and leave the grease. You know, they have to do it correctly. So it's kind of looking that the owner is doing what they're supposed to do, and maybe we say, you know what, your business seems to have increased. You're going to have to go from 6-month pumping to 3-month pumping. You know, and we also kind of check on the pumpers to make sure that they're actually doing their job correctly and not cheating the business.
So, what about backflow preventers for like residential irrigation with, you know, the pop-up sprayers and stuff like that? Is that something
She
that's...
spoke to that.
Yeah, well...
is that something that, my question is that something that Brian's gonna be looking at? Because, you know, I see these things going in quite often, and I know that people are not getting permits for those.
Yeah, if they're not getting permits, the real danger is if they use a lot of chemicals on their lawn, or, which we know, I'm sorry, but a lot of people in McCormick Woods do. We can tell that by looking at the water quality in the ponds out there. Okay, I mean, we get a chlorine read in that pond that's right by that dam. Seriously, I mean even after it's percolated. But so if they have a chemical feed addition, there are systems that do that. That's absolutely, we have to have a backflow assembly, or if they use a lot of chemicals on the lawn. So it's oftentimes municipalities, and I think Port Orchard is one, if somebody comes in to get a permit for an irrigation system, it's automatically going to have at least a double check on it, just because of the nature of the beast.
Yeah. I think there's a fair amount of those that go in without permits.
Yeah, and we know there is. And you know, it's an imperfect world.
Yeah.
We just catch them where we can.
Somewhere.
Yeah.
I mean, when I first started, one of the first things that happened was we got a call from somebody, I don't remember who it was, somebody up on Sydney anyway, and they said, well, we had a question about how we're gonna, if we have a requirement for any kind of grease interceptor or anything, or sewer interceptor thing for this new veterinary clinic we have up here. And we're like, what veterinary clinic? And they had gotten a tenant improvement permit that we didn't know anything about, and they had a lab in it. And there was no backflow assembly. So we've kind of gotten that tight, and we work pretty closely now with DCD, or we try to. And so we've gotten that door closed. So this is just another door to close.
Well, the scope of this was pretty impressive, and
You know, it's
once you start getting the definitions, you could tell that there's a lot of ways people have tried to game the system.
You bet.
That you called out here. So I was pretty impressed with the code.
Thank you.
Again, the whole communication piece, I think
Yeah.
we were alluding to that earlier, Sean, you know, because, you can't put everything in our water bill.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if it's too onerous, people just kind of give up, they retreat, and they don't even know where to start. And so, to your point, a tool to make it kind of simple and boil down the 3 big bullet points and start that education.
Cool.
Well, and we've already started it with Brian's hire and education. That's his big part
Yeah,
of his
he's
job.
got his cross-connection control certification now, so he's qualified to do that. That's one of the things, one of the holes that one of the doors we closed, was that DCD was really doing most of the backflow assembly work or monitoring or whatever, but they don't have anybody that's certified for cross-connection. They have their plumbing code experts and building code experts, but it's kind of a different animal. So that's why we said, let's partner, because we've got that expertise. So.
Thank you, Jackie. Thank you very much. Any other questions? Or anything for the good of the order?
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, this is coming to council for approval at the next meeting next week. So.
Okay. Is Nick still on? Oh.
Is Nick's right
Here
there?
it is.
I had sent, if you guys can indulge me for another minute, not related to this issue, but I had asked Nick about, we seem to have a proliferation of signs going up all over the place. And
I'd say.
I thought we had,
Ones too.
yeah, I thought and many of them are using those wire wickets that we specifically prohibit. And I thought we had code in place where we could simply pull those. But Nick, you had sent an email saying that we've got to develop code for that. And I was just wondering if you could give us sort of the elevator speech on what we can do for non-political signage.
Yeah, so if you remember, in 2014 or 2015, there was a case, Reed versus Gilbert, that said that sign regulations had to be content neutral. And so we wrote a content neutral sign, but there's a separate case out of Tacoma, it was Collier versus Tacoma, that said that you can't regulate speech within a traditional public forum. And so you had two cases that were sort of at odds, one federal and one state. And our conclusion was that the lowest risk path was to allow temporary signs and not differentiate between political and non-political speech. Since then, the Ninth Circuit has issued a decision that said there is some ability to distinguish between commercial and non-commercial speech. And so we were exploring that with the Planning Commission, and the recommendation that we have from our attorneys was to really document the problem over a period of time. And so we've been going out about once a month, taking photographs of all the temporary signs at various intersections so that we can attempt potentially to bring forward an ordinance that would prohibit commercial signage within the right of way, but still allow non-commercial signage in the right of way. So we are currently building that documentation. We started it in the fall, and what we learned is that the signage really disappears in the winter when it's dark and gloomy and nobody can really see the signs anyway. And then as soon as spring comes, they kind of explode and are everywhere. So we're getting a lot of good documentation, and I would expect that will go back to the Planning Commission probably in August or September for review. And maybe the council would see something later this year where we could bring an ordinance that would restrict temporary signage only to non-commercial speech.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that, Nick.
That's a great
You're welcome.
question, and it is everywhere.
It is everywhere.
You can't even
It's
find
taken
a
on.
room. Yeah, it has become a nuisance, and I'm seeing as I'm out there what a problem it is. So I hope, I don't know what's going to happen in the fall. We're really get going, but anyway, it was a great question.
If we can ever pull it down, it'd be awesome, you know, because just around our own roundabouts on Tremont, it's just like, I'm tired of it.
It's an eyesore, it really is, and I'll be contributing. Okay, so, thank you, everyone. I think we're done.
you.
Adjourn the meeting.
Good work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Recording.